Pat, I don't know if you're ready, but I think we're ready to roll here with your chat with Pat today.
Yes, today we have with us Professor Dr. Regis Martin. He is a professor of theology and faculty associate with the Veritas Center of Ethics in Public Life at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. He has a huge bio, but I want to get right to the article he wrote for Crisis Magazine. And it's called, and I think this is an interesting one, especially with what's been in the news this week. It's called Living an Integrated Life. Welcome, Dr. Martin. How are you today?
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. This article, am I correct in assuming you're going to be writing more on this topic?
Yeah, it's part of a series on how do we
Great.
restore a Catholic culture. So it's
I love it.
a pretty ambitious project.
Yeah, it is. And I can't wait to read more. But I want to talk to you a little bit about this whole beginning
Sure.
to this series. So you say in our country, you say that the core principle that binds us together as a people is really God. Why do you say that in our times today?
Well, I mean, it's obvious that he's the author of life. We don't generate being, but receive it from him. So we're custodians, shepherds of being, which means we have an obligation to protect what God has given us, particularly the most vulnerable among us, and that would be the unborn. We have an obligation to defend and uphold their right to life. So we need to build a culture that would somehow encourage and promote respect for life, reverence for life, and that's a tall order.
Yes, it is. And you say that it really is the role of the church to be the keeper of the moral tablets. And
Yes.
I think that idea that you're putting forth here about we are body and soul and we kind of live in this sacred and secular world. What's our challenges here?
Well, I mean, we're not divided personalities unless you wish to become schizophrenic. We live in two worlds, the city of God and the city of man. And I think the church is entitled to ask of the secular order, the public life, society, that it not place any impediments in the way of men and women pursuing a life of holiness. That's not really too much to ask. I noticed as a kind of backdrop to this discussion we're having, events as they unfold in Quebec, our neighbor to the north. The government has just outlawed any public manifestation of religion. You can't pray outside, which
Wow.
is really grotesque. I can't imagine a more violent assault upon the integrity of the human person. You can't express your faith in any public way. So there's a part of the stage, the public life, that is off limits to God and to men and women who want to draw close to God. That, it seems to me, is intolerable.
Yeah. And one of the things one of our senators said this week kind of knocked me for a loop is when he said the rights don't come from God. They come
Right.
from the government and laws. And so this is what kind of leads me into the heart of your article here is
Yeah, I think-
how do we do that, you know?
Right. It's pretty astonishing. That was Senator Tim Kaine, the junior senator from Maryland, who happens to be a practicing Catholic, and he's telling us that governments confer these rights, not God. So we have to ask the government to allow us to exercise freedom of speech and freedom of worship. I mean, there's something obscene about that. He needs to take Civics 101 all over again. There's a beautiful line in W.H. Auden, a great British poet, who said, legislation is helpless against the wild prayer of longing. And that's the deepest desire we have, the longing for God. And you can't pass laws to prevent people from reaching out to God or having God reach into this world and make contact with the men he created to be in communion with him. So the church, I think, is allowed to ask the state, the society, to make it easier for men to try and practice a life of virtue. At least minimal human decency ought to be upheld by the civil order.
Yeah. So I just want to touch, I know you got to get going because you've got class, but you talk about a book, Prayer as a Political Problem, and that it changed kind of the way you saw things. What was its, how did it change you? What was its impact?
Well, the book came out in 1965 by Jean Cardinal Daniel Lew. And in the piece I wrote for Crisis, I mentioned that it worked a great sea change in my life because he begins with a question that is not widely understood these days, particularly in the secular West. And that's the recognition that the religious problem is a mass problem. In other words, there's something really unhealthy, incongruous, that's the word he uses, about juxtaposing a private religion alongside an irreligious society. In other words, you have these islands of monastic observance, and they're surrounded by this great sea of atheism. And Daniel Lew is saying, that's crazy. That's not natural. It's not Christian. And so he wrote the book to try to answer the question, how can we join society and religion in such a way that we don't instrumentalize one at the expense of the other? We're not theocrats. We don't want the cardinal, the bishop, telling the mayor how to run the city. But then the mayor can't really tell the bishop how to run his diocese. And there are limits on what the city may do at the expense of faith and God. And there's a great... Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's very true. How we do that, I think George Melander said the church needs to be the conscience of the state. And that's an
I'm
interesting
always
way to look at it.
struck by something that Pope St. Paul VI said back in 1970. He simply told the junta in Brazil to stop torturing their citizens. So there are limits on what the state can do. And it's the business of the church to step in and say, look, you have trespassed those limits. You have breached that barrier. And because we represent God on earth, we're going to tell you to cut it out. But positively, I think the church is certainly within her rights to ask the civil order to try to make things a little easier for men and women who'd like to get to heaven.
That's right. Well, Dr. Martin, thank you so much. I know you need to get to class. Thanks for being with us today. I hope you'll come back as this continues to develop, as your more articles come out. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I'm delighted to participate in this conversation.